For 4 months, I had been working at my desk while everyone else went about their lives, living off of coffee and my own stubbornness. Weekends, early mornings, and late evenings are given up not for love or fun, but for one purpose: a project so big and career defining that I knew it would make all the difference in my life. After countless spreadsheets, restless nights, and an absurd amount of stress, I eventually succeeded. It was a perfect presentation. The customer was overjoyed. They signed the contract. What's the best part? A prize. My pulse was pounding like it had after a marathon when I sat at my desk and read the email again for what felt like the 10th time. You went above and beyond, Samantha. Think of this as a private thank you. Have fun with the game. 2 Super Bowl tickets were confirmed in the email attachment, front row, line of 40 yards. Football fans would kill for this experience. I printed the email with shaking hands, making sure everything was correct. My boss, Richard Faulkner, the senior partner at my firm, received the tickets straight from the client. He was in charge of client gift logistics, so it made logical. But I could already see the scene when he would deliver me the envelope as he entered my office with that hardly seen smile of approval. "Well done, Samantha," he would say. However, that time never arrived. But 3 days later, Richard himself arrived, swaggering into my office, as if he controlled not just the company but the air I breathed. He leaned on my desk and crossed his arms with that omnipresent smugness before I could even glance up. His voice radiated phony warmth as he remarked, "I heard you got some great news." Anticipating that he would eventually give me the tickets, I grinned. "Yes, thank you so much. I gave that project everything I had." He seemed amused as he nodded. "You did. That's why I wanted to discuss the tickets with you." There was something about the way he spoke that made me nervous. With caution, I answered, "Right." Richard let out a breath as if he were pretending to be the reluctant good guy in a discussion he was trying to sway in his favor. "The problem, Samantha, is that clients don't always comprehend how corporate operations operate and that gifts aren't truly intended for a single recipient." "What?" I blinked. "These kinds of things? They're really more of a gift to the firm, not just to you," he said with a half-hearted shrug, as if he were explaining something obvious. I felt my gut turn to knots. "No," I replied, maintaining a level and composed tone of voice. The email stated clearly that the tickets were a personal "thank you" to me. Like I was a kid arguing over bedtime, Richard waved a dismissive hand. "I understand," he continued, "but we have to make strategic choices in business, so I'll be taking the tickets." The earth swayed under me. "What?" "I already made arrangements. I'm taking a potential investor to the game." "It's a smart play for the company," he said with the audacity to smile. I was unable to think or breathe for a few seconds. I had been working myself to the bone for months, giving up every last bit of my personal life for this one moment, and he was just taking them. I managed to keep the fire in my chest from exploding by saying, "That's not fair. The client gave them to me." "You don't understand how the world works, little girl," Richard added with his enraged smirk. "The true reward here is to be thankful that you have a job," he stated with ease. My claws dug into my palms as I squeezed my fists beneath my desk. "Thank you. What am I thankful for being trampled underfoot? Having something taken from me?" As though I were some submissive dog, he patted my desk and said, "I'm sure you understand. And hey, don't worry. You'll have plenty of other opportunities." After that, he turned and left. I sat there, breathing in short gasps as I gazed at the vacant doorway. This, he believed, was over. He assumed I would simply roll over and accept it. He was unaware of what was about to happen. I had myself take a deep, deliberate breath to calm the fury inside of me. I had to be logical and intelligent if I intended to fight back. And fortunate for me, Richard had just given me the ideal chance to ruin him. My hands balled into fists beneath my desk, claws cutting into my flesh, and my artificial smile fell to the floor like a mask the moment Richard left my office. He genuinely believed he could simply accept them. I sat there silently, pushing myself to think and breathe because I couldn't afford to respond emotionally just yet, and I needed to be wise if I wanted to defeat him. I was fortunate that Richard had just provided me with the ideal opportunity. I opened the client's email once more and quickly skimmed over the words "personal thank you," which was enough to demonstrate Richard's lack of integrity. Playing it cool, I took out my phone and texted, Me? Hey, I just wanted to say again how much I appreciate you thinking of me when you gave those Super Bowl tickets to someone else at my company. I hope to see you soon. My phone buzzed less than a minute later. Client, who took them? Are you serious? I grinned. It was going to be good, I see. Me, it's no huge thing, but I'm not sure, honestly. I just know I never got them. I was letting him get angry on his own, dangling bait, and I knew precisely what I was doing. And he did. Client, let me take care of this, don't say anything. No big deal. Those were meant for you. Bingo. My pulse accelerated as I reclined in my chair, realizing that this was now a fight between Richard and the customer rather than just between Richard and me, and I was already aware of the winner. Richard's ego would not allow him to keep his mouth shut, so I spent the remainder of the day gathering information. As it turned out, I could hear his voice coming from the break room at noon. Yeah, 40-yard line seats. Going to be crazy. I'm taking a big fish with me, you know how it is. Relationships are everything in these kinds of deals. I remained barely visible, suppressing a chuckle. The conceit. The foolishness. He was boasting, and he wasn't even attempting to hide it. The office was a hive of activity by Friday, when Richard was departing early, catching a flight to the city of the Super Bowl that afternoon, and strutting around like a king, cocky as ever, as if he had won. He looked at me in the corridor. Have big plans this weekend? I said in a casual tone. Oh, just making moves, he said with a grin. I said, enjoy the game. I meant it too. Because the trap would already be set by the time he landed. I received a text message from my client on Saturday morning. Client, please cooperate. I've set up a meeting for Monday. I smiled. Yes, I did trust him. The Super Bowl arrived on Sunday, and I didn't watch a second of it because I was eager for Monday. Not because I wasn't still a devoted football fan. Due to Monday, the actual game started at that point. Richard arrived at the workplace with a strut at precisely 9:07 a.m. Wearing sunglasses and sipping coffee, he had the arrogance of a man who believed he had won. As he walked past my desk, he hardly gave me a glance. God, I was so excited for today. A meeting invitation appeared on my screen at 9:30 a.m. Subject, required attendance for client review where, conference room, as senior partners Richard Faulkner and Samantha, the client representative, were present. I selected accept. It's showtime. I sensed it as soon as I entered the conference room with the glass walls, the strain. Seated at the head of the table, Richard appeared confident and at ease, with his arms relaxed and his legs crossed, as if this were just another ordinary meeting. When the client entered, that assurance faltered. However, what actually caused Richard to sit up? The woman who trailed him. The way everyone in the room shifted told me all I needed to know, even though I didn't recognize her. The customer sat down with a courteous but icy expression. This is Andrea Holloway, VP of Corporate Partnerships, he stated in a silky voice. The briefly disoriented Richard blinked and said, Oh, of course, Andrea. Nice to meet you. I'm not here for small talk, Andrea said with a single pointed nod. The customer then leaned forward and interlaced his fingers. I have a question before we start today's agenda. A deliberate, slow pause. Did you like the game, Samantha? There was silence in the room. I cocked my head, seeming to be perplexed. The game? The Super Bowl, he said, his smile without sincerity. Playing foolish, I pinched my brows and said, Oh, I didn't go. His face grew serious. He remarked in a calm, dangerously calm voice. That's strange because I personally made arrangements for you to have 2 seats. The room's atmosphere changed. Each pair of eyes looked at Richard. He froze for the first time. I saw it, but it was only a flash of panic. Oh, yeah, see, there was a bit of a mix-up. Samantha wasn't able to attend, so, he said, forcing a laugh. The customer interrupted, asking, So who did? Well, I took a client, Richard said, shifting in his chair. The ensuing hush was oppressive. Just to make sure I understand, Richard, are you saying that you took corporate seats that were intended as a personal gift for an employee and gave them to someone else? Without authorization? Andrea moved closer. The color faded from Richard's face. The customer wasn't finished. He shook his head and remarked, I was really looking forward to seeing Samantha at that game. I thought it was a fitting reward for months of hard work. But imagine my surprise when I learned she never even got them. Richard's mouth opened, closed, and then opened once more. Samantha, did Richard let you know about any company policy that would have required you to turn in those tickets? Andrea turned to face me. I spoke in a steady tone. No, he just claimed them as his. The room abruptly changed into a courtroom. Richard, you do realize that this isn't just an ethical violation, right? Andrea said with a harsh exhale. She reclined. This is theft by a corporation. Richard turned white. I don't think I can continue working with someone who would undermine his own team like this, the client said with a sigh and a shake of his head. Wait, Richard jumped to his feet. I trust you'll handle the internal response, the customer said, turning to Andrea. Her expression was unreadable as she nodded, effective immediately. That's when Richard finally got it. He was in more than simply trouble. He was done. And me? I simply relaxed and took in the performance. Normally pompous and full of arrogant confidence, Richard's expression had changed into something I had never seen before, and his stillness stretched across the conference room like a noose tightening around his throat. Fear. The VP of Corporate Partnerships, Andrea, leaned forward, her hands folded on the table, her face unreadable but her voice calm, smooth, with a hint of authority. You know what this looks like, Richard? As he swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbed. Oh, he got it. He simply didn't know how to get out. This isn't just about the tickets, Richard, the customer said, shaking his head. It's about professionalism, trust, and knowing that when I choose to work with someone, they won't screw over their own employees for personal gain. The other senior partners, who had been silent until now, exchanged uneasy looks as Richard's jaw tightened and his fingers twitched on the table as he glanced around the room for an ally. There was no one who wanted to be connected to this mess. I didn't brag or smirk. I just sat motionless with my hands folded neatly in my lap. I didn't have to. Before Andrea eventually spoke again, there was a long, oppressive stillness. Did you incur any expenses for this trip, Richard? What? He snapped his head up. Did you charge the flight? The hotel? Any meals? Any transportation to the firm's account? Andrea said, cocking her head slightly. His eyes sparked with genuine dread for the first time. You used company funds to take someone else to the Super Bowl, with tickets meant for your employee? The client said, laughing briefly and without humor. Listen, I know how this looks, but I was thinking about the firm. I was cultivating a relationship with a valuable investor, Richard said, straightening his shoulders and attempting a grin. What investor? The client said, raising an eyebrow. Richard blinked and said, Pardon me? Who exactly did you take to the game, Richard? The customer said, leaning back in his chair with his arms folded. I observed his mind racing, gears spinning, searching for a reason. But the truth was already known to me. Richard hadn't taken anyone who was important to the business, including investors. His brother-in-law had accompanied him. A man with no business contacts, no possible transactions, and no purpose other than to enjoy the greatest seats in the house and drink expensive beer during that game. Richard had also spent every dime. The knowledge that there was no way out of this was evident on his face. Unbelievable, the client said with a sigh and a head shake. He then looked at Andrea. Please take note that Richard Faulkner will no longer be doing business with my firm going forward. Richard jerked his head up and said, Wait, that's not? The customer didn't even give him a glance. I'm willing to talk if you want to designate another senior partner to manage my account. Then, to me, or to be honest, I'd rather work with Samantha directly going forward. I was able to maintain a neutral expression, but on the inside, I was yelling with satisfaction. Andrea nodded and said, I understand. She made a few notes on her tablet before casting a cold gaze at Richard. We'll be dealing with this internally, Richard, so I advise you to take the remainder of the week off while we assess the matter. And with that, he was finished. Richard's face went completely white, and he was about to object when he noticed Andrea's expression. On the face of the customer, on the faces of everybody, he was defeated. His chair clattered to the floor as he jerked to his feet and walked out of the room without saying another word. The glass doors closing behind him. The ensuing quiet was oppressive. The client's demeanor softened when he finally turned to face me. I'm sorry, Samantha. I should have personally made sure you received those tickets. You had no way of knowing. I shook my head. Honestly, this worked out better, I continued, looking at the door Richard had just entered. I like the way you think, he said with a laugh. Andrea slid a document across the table after grinning. Since you already handle the majority of the work on this account, Samantha, I would like to formally offer you a promotion. I went cold. A raise? I looked down at the paper. A big pay raise, more power. A title that made me equal to the folks who had previously fired me. I looked up after swallowing and asked, Are you serious? Definitely. You've earned it, Andrea said with a nod. I let out a breath, my heart thumping in my chest, and then, very slowly, almost unreal, I reached for the pen. I also signed. The customer stepped up and held out a hand. I'm glad to hear that. What about Samantha? Still dizzy from the sheer craziness of what had just transpired, I shook his hand and said, Yes? He grinned wryly. I'll send you the Super Bowl tickets the next time I get them. I shook my head and laughed. Richard believed he had stolen my prize. Rather, he gave me everything I could possibly desire. What's the best part? Monday has only barely begun. The office was bustling by the time I made my way back to my desk. People glanced at Richard's now empty corner office, muttered in the hallways, and snuck glances in the break room. When a senior partner bounded out of a conference room looking like he had just been struck by a vehicle, everyone took notice because news spreads quickly in the business world. I forced myself to maintain a straight expression as I sat down, but my inbox was immediately blowing up. Subject: What on earth just took place? Subject: Was Richard recently let go? Subject: Tell me everything, girl, OMG. Even my work chat was going crazy, with some wary and some jubilant remarks. My phone buzzed after that. Richard texted, Richard Faulkner, how came you did that? After a moment of staring, I typed back, Me? You seem to be making moves, but I'm not sure what you mean. I waited. No answer. Obviously not. As I looked at the freshly signed promotion letter on my desk, I exhaled slowly. I was victorious. Richard wasn't finished with me, though. My email rang an hour later. Subject: HR meeting, attendance needed right away. I furrowed my brows as I clicked it open. Samantha, you must report to HR right now for this required meeting. Knowing exactly what this was, I sighed. It was Richard's final move. Okay, let's get this done. The receptionist hardly looked at me as I entered the HR office before pointing to the conference room with the glass walls. Denise from HR was inside, sitting at the table with an already uneasy expression. On the other side, Richard. He no longer appeared arrogant. No, this was the expression of a man on the verge of collapse, a huddled creature trying desperately to pry himself free. Please take a seat, Samantha, said Denise, clearing her voice. Richard didn't merit my attention, so I didn't look at him. Then, however, he leaned forward, his voice brimming with phony alarm. I truly hoped we wouldn't have to do this, Samantha, but I have to bring up a very important matter. I arched an eyebrow, asking, Which is it? The firm has been reviewing some of your recent communications, and we have reason to believe that you violated corporate confidentiality by discussing internal business matters with an external client, he said with a dramatic sigh. I blinked. Oh, the play was this. Denise looked first at Richard and then at me. Richard brought this concern to us this morning, she said. He did, of course. He was attempting to rewrite history by portraying me as the issue in order to save what little career he still had. And what specific confidential business matters are we talking about? I asked, tilting my head. Richard pretended to be empathetic as he folded his hands on the table. Samsa, the emails you sent about the Super Bowl tickets were an internal matter, and you brought it up with a client directly. I laughed a little incredulously. Correct. You're implying that a present intended for me specifically, which was subsequently stolen, is now regarded as an internal business matter? When Denise heard the term stolen, she winced. Richard twisted his jaw and said, I wouldn't call it stolen, really, because the client did. In front of everyone, I interrupted him. The ensuing hush was deafening. I relaxed in my chair, totally at ease. You got caught, and now you're acting out because there were repercussions. This isn't about confidentiality. Richard, the first understand your concern, but after reviewing the situation, I don't see any actual policy violation on Samantha's part, Denise said, taking a deep breath. Pardon me? Richard swung his head in her direction. The client was the one who originally sent the gift, so he had the right to inquire about it, she said, looking at her notes. Samantha did not reveal the financials, trade secrets, or private company strategy, just the status of something that was personally hers. So that's it? You're just going to let her get away with, Richard said, his expression darkening. Denise sat up straight in her seat. Let's be clear, Richard, you, not Samantha, are the subject of the investigation. The words slammed into him. He began to say, when Denise interrupted. The client has officially withdrawn their partnership with you. The expense reports are being reviewed, and now, after everything, you're trying to retaliate against an employee who was recently promoted by the company. I need you to leave the room, Richard. You can go, Samantha, she said, getting to her feet. After gathering my belongings, I got up and left without even glancing at him. An email had already been sent by the time I returned to my desk. Richard Faulkner has left the firm with immediate effect, and we wish him well in his future pursuits. To be sure, I read it twice. Then, for the first time during the day, I smiled. Richard had left. I was victorious. The best thing, though, this was more than just a win for me. This served as a warning to all other bosses who are conceited and entitled. Never undervalue those whom you consider inferior, because it's possible that they will bring you down. After Richard left, something changed in the office. Yes, his name was removed from the directory. His office was locked. HR had already packed up his belongings. And although people were still whispering like they would for weeks, the weight of his presence had disappeared. He didn't seem to have existed at all. That ought to have been sufficient. However, one final task remained. I took out my phone and browsed to the number of my customer. The first ring caught his attention. With a hint of humor, he said, I assume you've heard the news, Samantha? Oh, I have. Figured I owed you a thank you, I grinned. Don't thank me. Richard did this to himself. You just gave him the rope, he said with a laugh. Enjoying this a bit too much, I reclined in my chair and said, Well, I appreciate you handling things so publicly. There was a pause, and his tone was measured when he began again. Samsa, tell me, are you content with your current situation? I sat up a little straighter after that. What do you mean? The firm promoted you because they had to, not because they wanted to? And Richard's downfall? That was all you did. Well, let's look at the facts, he remarked nonchalantly. You were the one actually doing the work. You built this account. I blinked and said, Oh, he said again, laughing. So let me make this simple. I want you to come work for me, he said. My heart skipped a beat. He went on. You've already shown that you're a strategic, astute individual who doesn't let people bully you. That's precisely the type of person I want in charge of my business strategy team. He let the silence linger. Then, at last and naturally, he remarked in a confident tone, I'll double whatever your company is paying you. I nearly dropped my phone. Double, nor a little uptick, nor a little raise. Double my pay. That's a big offer, I swallowed. It is. And it's only fair. He laughed. I paused. I had only received one promotion, so this was going too quickly. Was I really going to discard it? But then I gave it some thought. I reflected on the years I was underappreciated at this company and the occasions when folks like Richard stole and repackaged my ideas. I was told that the only reason I was promoted was because they were forced to do it by a scandal. Was there anything I actually owed them? No, I didn't. My face broke into a slow smile. I said, I think I'm ready for something better. Send me the offer. My letter of resignation was printed, signed, and tucked away in my bag the following morning. Heads turned as I went into the office. Some knew already, while others would soon learn. Denise's eyes widened as she skimmed the letter when I got to HR. Are you going? She inquired, startled. Got an offer I couldn't refuse, I said, nodding. She whistled softly as she looked at the pay listed. She mumbled, Well, I can't blame you. Damn. It was time, I said with a smile. Less than an hour was needed to pack up my desk, and a few colleagues stopped by, Some astonished, others unsurprised, and most simply congratulated me. And then, right before I left, it buzzed on my phone. A message from an unidentified number. Richard Faulkner, you're lucky, so enjoy your small triumph. I gazed for a long moment at the words. I typed back after that. Me? It was not a result of luck. I left that office for the last time after saying that. After a year, I had a view of the downtown skyline from my corner office. My crew appreciated me. My name was on the door, and I was paid more than I could have ever dreamed. And the finest of all, at last I was employed by individuals who appreciated me. I was looking through the most recent industry news on my phone when I noticed a headline. Richard Faulkner, a former executive, sues his former company, alleging wrongful termination. I chuckled. The battle he was currently fighting had already been lost. I leaned back in my chair and put my phone down. Richard had been stepping over people, grabbing things that weren't his, and stealing credit for years. And at the end, he lost everything. Conversely, me, I got everything. And that, exactly, of all the retaliation, that was the sweetest.